There is so much more that God could give us. He's only waiting for us to acknowledge his will in order to give them.
The whole world is sick.
Are you worried about America? I am.
Believe the impossible and you can do the incredible.
Stress thinking, oh goodness, this is so glorious, but the chastisements are going to be so long and brutal. Yeah, for the world, but what we're doing right now is begging you to become part of the remnant, part of those who really trust in our Lord, are really trying to live in his will, trust in his mercy. For those, I believe that the very refuges themselves will be kind of almost like mini eras, little kind of small mini eras of peace, not as glorious as the era I'm describing now, but in some ways a foreshadowing of it. And that could be incredibly close. I don't know the dates, of course. I'm speculating as much as anyone, but the seals, that they could all finish very quickly. And then we've got the warning, and who knows, maybe just several weeks of post warning, and then you're in the refuges. We could see these graces incredibly soon if we do our job to proclaim his will, to proclaim his mercy, if we do what he's asking of us. And there's so many more promises he gives.
Well, there are.
Go through
well, you can certainly go through them. I mean, I'm just looking at here, and I'm going to just summarize a couple because you've already done it. That just blew my mind. You've already mentioned most of them. But just as far as you have everything will be transformed to be enthrallingly beautiful, including human beings, even physically, though of a beauty entirely pure, like the Blessed Virgin. Now, the next one, this one really hit me because you start getting into this, like I mentioned earlier in an earlier episode, of the veil between heaven and earth is at its thinnest. And it says, and our intuition, because you mentioned this too, we kind of skipped over, but you said we will be given infused science in our intellects in order to have intuitive knowledge of natural things. And I'm going to connect this to the next thing, and then I want your comment on it. It says, we will be able to hear the enchanting celestial music of the spheres. That is, the reverberations of the motions of the stars and planets, which upon our ability to sense will far surpass in beauty even the greatest symphonies of Mozart. Now, tell us a little bit about that. That was I told my kids that. They're like, what are you talking about? That's amazing.
Mind-blowing. But this is, ironically, as mind-blowing as it is, this is something that even the ancient philosophers just assumed was true. You look up at this, we don't do that anymore. That's one of the things we never do in the modern world, right? We're too busy with our iPhones. We don't look up at the sky at night. It is so beautiful. There was some poet, now I can't remember which one it was. He said, if only the stars appeared but once in 1,000 years, how men would stop and wonder. But because we're acquainted with it, we just take it for granted. But if we only saw it once in a while, that would just say to us immediately, God did that. And the ancients, they looked at that and they realized that. And you look at the stars at night, it looks like a music box, doesn't it? You open up a music box, it might look like all these random dots at first. But no, it starts rotating. What comes out of it? This beautiful music. Well, that's what the motion of the spheres is like. And I don't pretend to be able to describe this scientifically. That's not, obviously I can't. But I don't see any reason to deny that, even from a purely physical perspective. And in some way, this incredible motion of all the heavenly bodies is creating some sort of, God put every star, every planet exactly where it is. He did that. And everything he does has a purpose. And that purpose is always beautiful. The design of everything that God made is beautiful and perfect. which is why transhumanism is so wrong. We cannot improve human nature. We can't. But why wouldn't that be the case with the stars as well? And in fact, that is the case. So that makes literal music. The ancients presupposed, and Jesus tells Luisa, yeah, that's true. And you'll hear it during the era. And in fact, I think I have the actual quote from Jesus to Luisa here in front of me. He says that, yeah, there it is. He says, creation, the echo of the celestial fatherland. So we'll get all these things a billion times more in heaven. But creation, the physical world, it's supposed to be the echo of heaven. It's supposed to be a foreshadowing of it. We almost never get a taste of that today with how evil and ugly and sinful the world is, but it's supposed to be a foreshadowing of that, a foretaste of that. So Jesus tells Luis it contains this music, this royal march of the spheres, the heaven, the sun, even the sea. They all possess perfect harmony. They go around continuously. He says this order, this harmony, it forms such an admirable symphony of music that it could be said to be like the breath of the supreme will blowing into all created things, like musical instruments, forming the most beautiful of all melodies, such that if only people could hear it, they would remain ecstatic. The kingdom of the supreme will, that is the era on earth, will have the echo of the music of the celestial fatherland and the echo of the music of creation. So we'll almost hear echoes from heaven itself, kind of mysteriously enchanting us. We'll also have this music of creation. We'll hear the music of the spheres.
This is amazing.
That has always fascinated me, and that's just one of the countless promises about the reign of the divine will, the era that we're given.
Yeah, and I know you might want to jump forward a little bit, but I'm not. I'm going to stay on some of these points here because I'm going to just say them, and then if you want, you can comment on one or two of them. But I mean, just listen to this. This is from your book on page 295. We will be. I already did that. All animals will reacquire automatic obedience to man, and their natural inclination to serve man. It takes us all the way back to Eden, and you think about. It kind of makes you wonder, and I've often wondered this too, like what were the effects of Eden that carried into creation? You think about, like, is there such thing as a friendly shark or this is a whole nother, this could go off into a whole nother conversation, but you just kind of wonder, will certain things cease to be? Will they be transformed? And they're, like, how do you not be fearful of a great white shark swimming around? You're like, oh yeah, I'm just going to grab onto its fin. It's going to take me into some, like, once again, like a Narnia experience. Or I'm like, but
yeah,
this
that's,
is
all
real.
those details speculate about. But in general, Eden is the paradigm of the era. There will be differences, and I can't claim to know what all the details of the differences will be. But the general one thing that is indispensable to that is that man is the king of creation. That is clear in Jesus' revelations to Luisa. That's also clear in just Catholic thought. Adam was the pin in everything in physical creation is made for us. It's so nauseating when you hear these environmentalists say, we got to get rid of this idea that we're above other things. Of course we're above other things. Man, meaning man and woman, humans, we're above everything else physical on earth, in the universe. We are the crown of physical creation. Everything exists for our sake, and we exist for God's sake. That's the hierarchy. So for that hierarchy to be reflected, all of creation has to serve us. That's why God made it. Physical plants, minerals, animals, they all exist to serve us. And there's no arrogance in acknowledging that. That is absolute truth. That was true in Eden. It's true now, but we don't tend to observe the effects of that because of how sinful, of the effects of sin. But because that was palpably true in Eden, it will become palpably true again in the era. And I don't have a quote directly from the volumes of that in front of me, but I do recall just from memory reading about how because of the divine will reigning in Jesus and Mary, and of course Jesus was God himself, but Mary wasn't, but she lived in the divine will perfectly, animals themselves would try to serve them. And just during their earthly lives. And in order to not make things too obvious, Jesus said, he would have to command them to stop. Like birds would just try to bring him like berries just because it was natural. It was just intuitive. It's not, they didn't have reason, but this isn't this isn't Narnia. This isn't like talking animals. We'll never have that. That's not their nature.
Or
It's not,
will we?
oh, wait for it. But they will. Whatever is here. Let me put it this way: whatever is possible, even if it requires enormous effort to bring about on Earth now, could certainly become the norm during the era. Think about an extremely well-trained dog right now. It serves man very well. That's the natural state of all animals, in accordance with their own, physical abilities, which vary by species, of course. But the natural inclination of all animals, original nature, as designed by God, is to serve man. So because the divine will reign perfectly in Jesus and Mary, even animals tried to serve them. And for Jesus and Mary to not let too much of a show be put on for others, they had to command them to depart. But naturally, birds would just try to bring them berries and stuff. Like it would just, this is how animals operate with respect to man, who alone bears the image of God of all created things. It will be like that again during the era. And we'll still have technology, sure. We'll have more, in fact, because we'll have infused science. We'll have a natural understanding.
That was a question that I had. And this is a little bit of a parenthesis, but I'm going to jump on it since you mentioned it. Is technology, things that I've heard. I can't even give a source, to be honest, but it seems like it comes across as, when this is all done, we're kind of going back to almost like not a Stone Age, because it has a different image, but it's going back to basically, 18th century kind of level of things. And God, everything will be reduced, and it's almost like mankind starting again. Like I said, I've never found a source for that, but what will, like, from what you've learned, will there be any technology, and will, obviously we're not going to be using it in a bad way.
Right. So this is heavy speculation. I would say it would be like, again, I could be completely wrong, but maybe 18th century with like a touch of sci-fi in there or something like that, because the majority of the uses of technology today are unneeded. Like if imagine a world, and I talk about this a bit in maybe in my big book, The Crown of Sanctity, from a couple of years ago, but imagine a world in which creation cooperates with man, where nature, where we can easily get all the food we need, where the most delicious and nutritious fruits grow like now only the worst weeds would, where animals are in perfect obedience, where a draft horse is twice as strong and fast, requires no upkeep, is perfectly obedient. Most of the technology we have becomes kind of futile. Mm-hmm. And it's not that we would have the ability for it. It's just, why would you bother with...
Why have a grocery store?
I have a grocery store. Why would you bother with expensive and noisy and smelly and problematic car if like a draft horse is just there to pull your cart, your easy wooden cart, anywhere you need, anytime? So I think that most of the technology we have, we just wouldn't bother with. It's not that we'll forget how to do it or something. It would be just kind of like a joke. It's like, oh, why would I bother with that? It would be like trying to pick up your car, an old car phone, if you have an iPhone today. Mm-hmm. We'll have better. But I also think that God gave us intellect and scientific pursuit for a reason. And I think that some technology will be genuinely useful. I don't know exactly which technologies, but I do know that everything will be beautiful. We will no longer do ugly things purely for pragmatic reasons. Beauty will be our pursuit in everything that we make, in everything we design, and everything that we do. And when fiction writers write fantasy stuff and sci-fi stuff, we won't have any absurdities in the era. It'll be perfectly reasonable and in accordance with the moral and divine and natural law. But I think that some of the fiction writers are onto some things. And whenever they speculate about what Earth could look like in these fictional scenarios they come up with, when they're talking about like not a dystopia, of course, they describe beauty. Mm-hmm. And that's how we use our ingenuity and our innovation and our technology. It'll always be beautiful. It'll be for the sake of the good, the true, and the beautiful. So the details that are difficult to settle on, but we can all have fun speculating on it, I guess.
Well, this is kind of what you mentioned in your last point you had on this is 296. It says, there will be an abundance of all goods, including natural ones. The immense riches of creation will be fully available to all. And accordingly, Jesus tells Luisa that all the elements are in waiting, almost eager, as it were, to deliver to their king, man himself, the superabundance of beneficial effects they contain within themselves, but which they can only deliver a small fraction of now due to the present reign of sin. You're right. We see this depicted in so many different things, even in animations when they try to give these certain worlds in which characters are in. And there's there's some element of truth in it in the midst of the fiction. You know, my kids love Moana. I don't know if you've ever seen Moana, but we really like it, and it has a lot of good points that are in there. I won't actually belabor the whole thing, but there's a lot of things as far as the disturbance of the sin of one person and what it caused on the islands and in the Pacific, because it's all based off of this young girl who's destined to be the one who helps restore the island, and for them it was their own goddess, but the heart was restored, and then it brought back all the life that was taken away from the pride of man who wanted to take that heart and use it for their own power. And so but it has how just creation cooperated for that to happen, to make it possible to restore it. And yet, in the meanwhile, it was also the evil was taking away from all of creation and their food. Anyway, it's a fun story. We love island stuff. It's like it's like in the middle of the Pacific, and
it gets to it. And in fact, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had a quote here from Saint Gertrude. This is the revelations to Saint Gertrude. It's nothing to do with Luisa, but she was told, it is the property of grace to communicate to the body as well as the mind a marvelous glory and brightness. Because of the sinfulness of the world, the effects of the fall, we just don't see half of that most of the time. Mm-hmm. We don't see the communication of the effects of grace to the physical realm, because we have to have that really thick veil now. Jesus tells Luisa it's for our own good now that we be deprived of all sorts of things, because now, if we had these benefits, they would probably just induce us to sin, because we have got all those temptations. We'd probably just become carnal. But Jesus says, this is now Jesus to Luisa, not Saint Gertrude, but during the era, he says, poverty, unhappiness, needs, evils, they will be banished from the children of my will. It would not be decorous for them, it would not be decorous for my will, so immensely rich and happy to have children who would lack something, and who would not enjoy all the opulence of its goods. Therefore, each will possess the fullness of goods and the full, I mentioned, terrestrial happiness in the place in which the supreme will has placed him. I'm sorry, I thought I had more of the quote there, but the rest of the quote is that Jesus says that now, meaning before the era, now it's necessary for this abundance of goods for us to often be deprived of that, because that very deprivation attaches us to eternal things, which are infinitely more important. There won't anymore in the era be that temptation to be attached to temporal things instead of eternal things. We will all be living in the divine will. We'll no longer have these silly temptations we have now to prefer the creature to the creator. So because those temptations will no longer exist, there will no longer be the need for those who live in the divine will to be deprived of the material necessities of life. So all creation, Jesus says, and that's the quote you were mentioning earlier, the elements are all in waiting, Jesus tells Luisa. The sun, the plants, everything in creation, all the benefits we derive from them now, they're a tiny fraction of what they could be delivering to us. And I don't pretend to be able to describe that scientifically. No one can.
Yeah.
It's a property of grace. Jesus says somewhere to Luisa that these are his ancient and celestial mysteries. No human would ever be able to figure it out. In fact, there's even a quote somewhere, I think he says, like, the most tiny mosquito, the most tiny gnat blows away the greatest human technology. I'm paraphrasing heavily. We can't figure out his designs, but we can trust that they exist. And I think anybody who's honest, you can look at the most advanced microchip out there, compare it to a leaf, to the cellular structure of a leaf, and it's blown away. God has us beat, technologically speaking. And if we think that just because we observe certain limitations generally existing in the world around us, that that's how it always has to be, we're wrong. There is so much more that God could give us. He's only waiting for us to acknowledge his will in order to give them.
Amazing.
Barely fathom what that will entail right now.
Yeah. Well, let's just get a couple more points before we wrap up. And one of them is death. You mentioned, he said, death will still happen, but not as the fearful and agonizing thing as it is today. Rather, as a mere peaceful transition from this life to the next, once we have completed our mission upon earth. And you see, moreover, he promises that the bodies of the dead will all remain incorrupt, fully composed in their tombs, awaiting the day of the general resurrection and last judgment. So that's pretty powerful, just to think about that, and that the fear of death goes away because the era of peace, which ties into what you talk about even after this section, it's all about heaven and what humanity has gone through to get to the era of peace, which is that step before our transition to heaven. And so you're longing for it because you're already having that perpetual taste of it. You even mentioned at another point, the sacraments aren't going to go away. They're going to continue, and in fact, they'll acquire their fullest meaning. Their fullest meaning and purpose.
Tells Luisa right. They'll become our very food instead of most people receive the Eucharist, for example, just as medicine, but it will be our very food, our life. They will have their. Jesus tells Luisa that during the era, the sacraments will have their full effects throughout the church.
Mm-hmm.
We've only seen a fraction of their effects so far.
Yep.
And that's the thing. The sacraments are directed towards eternity. We won't have any sacraments in heaven. We won't have any need for them anymore. But we'll always have the sacraments on earth. That's church teaching. We have to, there's a lot of Protestants or millenarians or dispensationalists who think that that'll all end even on earth during a literal 1,000-year reign. But this is nothing like that. We don't believe that as Catholics, and that's certainly not what Jesus tells Luisa. It's the opposite. The church will have its full triumph, its full glory. The sacraments have their full reign on earth. And that means certainly we still have to die. We still have to go home to heaven. But that will be completely different. And I actually have the quote from the volumes right there in front of me. Jesus tells Luisa, death will no longer have power in the soul. And I think that's another saying that there won't be mortal sin anymore. Mortal sin is like the death of the soul. And sure, you can be resurrected through confession, but so I think we'll still have maybe, and I'm speculating here, I don't know if this clearly answered, but maybe there'll still be venial sin in the air, I'm not sure. But I think it's safe to say with death having no power in the soul, mortal sin will basically have ended in the era. If it will have power in the body, he continues, it will not be death, but transit. And it will be death. He's saying right there, it will be death. So it's kind of a figure of speech to say it. He says it will not be death, but transit. And I think that what he's saying there is it won't be like death is today, this, which tends to be this terrifying, fearful thing. It will be else. In another passage, Jesus tells Luisa, it's once you've completed your mission on earth, once you have completed the final act in his will that he had planned for you on earth, there will be no reason for you to remain on earth anymore. It'll be time for you to go back home to heaven. And then at that moment, you will simply transit to heaven. And this is what plenty of theologians have speculated would be the case if Adam never sinned. Like Scotus says that he could be transported from a state of grace to a state of glory. But that will, again, it will be death, yes, in the sense that your soul is departing the body, but it won't be like it is today. It will be, Jesus continues, he says, without the nourishment of sin and a degraded human a degraded human will that produces corruption in bodies. Instead, during the era, bodies will not be subject to decomposing, becoming so horribly corrupt as to strike fear into even the strongest, as happens now, but they will remain composed in their sepulchres, waiting for the day of the resurrection of all. So that's another important thing to note. We, of course, already have incorrupt saints in the church now. So what's possible now, because we see it in rare cases, will become the norm in the era. We see plenty of saints even now dying in this incredible peace without any concern at all. Like, they're just happy about it. That's what death is supposed to be. It's just this transit. You're just going home to heaven. And in fact, it's never your body, the body, the temple, the soul. The body is the pinnacle of the human body is the pinnacle of physical creation. It's never a good thing that they have to get so horribly corrupted and degraded as they do. So the miracle of incorruption will be universal. No bodies will decompose during the era. That's something we of course see even now. So everything is still about heaven, and yet it will be. I compare it to the longing of vacationers at an airport versus the misery of someone in horrendous poverty who feels like they'll never even be able to go on a vacation in their life. It's still the vacation, heaven is what you're looking forward to, but it's a completely different type of longing. It's this confident expectation, this excitement of being just moments away from it. That's the era.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to get the final point and then your final thoughts, because it ties right into this, all about being about heaven, and even what we were talking about earlier as far as the special, unique experience that we will have in the era of peace in our relationship, not only with each other, but with the communion of saints. And you say this, the union between heaven and earth and the communion of saints will be so palpable that during the era, we will even be able to see and hear the blessed in heaven. Consequently, when loved ones die during the era, the farewell will not be the extremely painful thing it is for most people today. And the first part of that you took from a message from Luisa from 1928. I mean, that's just quite amazing to kind of feel like you're kind of mingling among the saints on earth in a way that it's not a matter of a mental exercise, like a meditation or contemplation. And in faith, you know that they hear you and you're like, this is, I don't want to say like we're looking at each other now virtually. But if it's a palpable sense, you think about loved ones who have died, and God willing, they're in heaven, or even the souls, suffering in purgatory. But it's almost like, is this like what Padre Pio experienced? That's what I was thinking about. Is that like, he was constantly encountering angels, he was constantly encountering saints and souls, and he lived more in the other world than in the spiritual world than he really did on earth. From everything I've learned about him, is it your understanding? Is it something like that? We'll just have that.
I think that's safe to say in general, is that these great mystics, what they describe, and we can, it's so hard for some people to relate to the mystics because they say it seems like it is a completely different type of existence, but that's the type of existence God wills for all of us. Mm-hmm. And that might seem fearful to you because you read about the mystics and they suffered tremendously. But that, the victim, God is not going to have us all be victim souls like they were. And we need to be open to his will. We need to offer ourselves as victim souls, certainly. But he's not going to ask you to suffer like Luisa did or like Padre Pio did. So don't be at all afraid of this. God wills these experiences, this union. And I'm sorry if I look distracted now, it's only because I'm trying to find the quote itself where Jesus talks about this, and I might or might not succeed. But he does assure us in his words to Luisa that we will see and hear the blessed in heaven. I think I might have found it here on my other screen. It's here it is. And I at least found one quote about this. One will be the order, the harmony, one the echo, one the life, because one will be the will. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven means that we will be doing God's will just as the saints do it in heaven. There's no difference at all in terms of how we're doing his will. The only difference is how we're experiencing his presence. They get the full-blown beatific vision. We don't get that on earth. We're longing for that, yes. But in terms of doing the will of God, which is what matters most, that's all that matters in terms of holiness. The beatific vision, that's our reward. In terms of if we're doing it the same as they are, we get to enjoy many of its effects the same as they do. Jesus continues, even more, as though many mirrors will be seen in heaven, and the creature, he says that with respect to us on earth, reflecting themselves in these mirrors will look at what the blessed in heaven are doing. They will hear their chants, their celestial melodies, and by imitating what they do, their chants, their melodies, there will be the life of heaven in the midst of creatures on earth. He continues, he says, my fiat, my will place everything in common between heaven and earth. So I'm glad I found that line there. And there's plenty of other places he talks about that. But he says it'll be like there's mirrors in heaven. So it's like, we still have to wait until heaven to be right there with our loved ones who have already gone before us. But it's like we're seeing them right there. It's like kind of reflected in some, and I can only guess as to how exactly that'll look, but it's not going to be it's not going to be literal, of course, but we will be so united to them that we won't have this horrible, horrible sadness, which almost everyone, if they're honest, experiences when a loved one dies. We won't have that anymore during the era. There will be I'm sure there'll be a certain sort of sadness. Yes, there always is, but it will be completely overridden by this joy that they are with Jesus and that we will be with them soon, and that we'll still feel right next to them. Just a little bit of extra separation is all. Whereas you are acting in pure faith right now. It's just pure knowledge, and yes, it's knowledge. Like you can be sure of heaven and Jesus' promises, but most people have very little palpable sense of that today, aside from the mystics. But in the era, everyone will palpably feel the closeness of the blessed in heaven.
Wow.
That's what God wills for earth. Adam forfeited it 6,000 years ago, and since then, God has been working step by step by step to bring us back to that. And of course, by far the biggest step in that is the redemption. That remains the absolute foundation of all of this. But still, that didn't complete the task. That was in and of itself the fulfillment. That was the climax. But the completion of that fulfillment, that's what we're about to enter into. That's his final effort on earth for our penultimate destiny.
Did Luisa ever receive any indication of how long this era would last? Is this something that's short-lived, or is it like in the sense of like, well, people, if there's a restoration, a full restoration of the human body, all ailments, everything's healed, you're restored to a beauty that you probably have never had, even if you were already handsome or beautiful. It's a very different beauty and a richer one. What does that mean in light of the aging process? And if sin it's almost like, are we kind of going back to maybe the biblical ages, or is this, I'm still going to let it be 90, but I'll be a handsome 90?
A handsome 90, a handsome 120, a handsome 900. I was just, my son just asked me today how old Noah was, and I had to say, well, he's 33 now because he's in heaven, and everyone in heaven is 33. But when he died, he was 900 something. I can't remember now, and I believe that's literally true. I know that's very unfashionable today to believe that's literally true, but I do believe that's
I agree with
literally
you.
true. So yeah, I mean that's what the Bible says. So I believe
And the
it's true.
church fathers believed it too.
And like just about all the fathers. So yeah, it's I think that's going to come back. Whether that'll have enough time to manifest itself, I don't know. I don't know of any indication in Luisa's revelations of how long this will be, short, long, medium. I'm not sure. Jesus gives some. He says that his will for creation was that it be filled with people. In fact, he actually uses the word crammed with inhabitants. For the earth to be crammed with inhabitants, that would have to be hundreds and hundreds of billions of people. So that would take a while. Now, I think there will be incredible. I think, it's hard to say. The chastisements will wipe out probably most of the population, but then population could increase pretty quickly after that, with great fertility and no famines and abundance of goods and no wars.
Well, there's going to be so many geological changes. I mean, the Earth itself, who knows what it's going to probably even look like from space when this is all done, because there will be massive changes that take place throughout the Earth, in the ocean and on land, and we didn't even talk about those things. But
huge. The map itself will look very different after these great upheavals of the divine chastisements. After the warning, and that's that'll be exciting. But wow. I can only guess this, and in fact, it's supposed to be mysterious. I think because we be so excited for the second coming of our Lord in the flesh, which will only happen at the end of time. I think that Jesus wants it to be mysterious even when we're in the era, because I think he wants us to wake up every morning during the era wondering if this will be the day he comes back again in the flesh, and excited for that. And maybe that's why he's left it so mysterious. That I don't know of any really reliable prophecy that said how long the era will be.
Wow. Well,
of course, it said in the gospel.
Well, on that note, Daniel, we have covered a lot in our conversation into the numerous parts that this has been broken down into. I want to thank you so much for your time. I know that as we're recording this last one, it's very late where you are. It's late where I am, and I'm 3 hours behind. So thank you for being so generous with all of us, with your time. And I really hope that everyone gets a copy of your book, Thy Will Be Done. I'm holding it up here, but I can also just quickly put it back onto the screen so you can get an idea of, well, that's the small version of it, but I'll just blow it up so you can see it. And Daniel, why don't you tell us how people can get a copy of your work, as well as where they can go to follow the latest of what you're doing, what you're writing, and those kinds of things.
Thank you. Yeah, you can hop on Amazon, just search for Thy Will Be Done, Daniel O'Connor. There's a couple other books also called Thy Will Be Done, but this should be pretty easy to find. And if you want to see the latest from me, you can always do that at my blog, dsdoconnor.com. And it should also come up pretty easily if you just Google Daniel O'Connor's blog. And you subscribe with your email address there, so that even if they try to censor me, I can still reach you.
Yeah, expect that to happen. I'm hoping that all of these episodes get put on without problem on YouTube, just because, I mean, when they're not censoring people, they have some features that I really do like that others don't. And, of course, that's where most people are subscribed to. And speaking of subscription, I'm covering my face with Thy Will Be Done. Thy Will Be Done, Block Peter. Please make sure you subscribe to our channel here, especially if you found our conversation to be edifying. There's a lot more in our library on this channel. We do also have I think I'm up to date. I have to double check on. We have a Rumble channel as well for those who are on there. But please subscribe and hit the bell so that you are always informed of the latest. I think as times get a little bit crazier, there might be more frequency coming on, probably in shorter segments, but not just to keep you informed, but there is something about our communion of saints in this virtual world that it gives some consolation, a touch point of like, hey, this is my prayer family. And it's just nice to hear from somebody, because when we sign off tonight and we do our things, we battle those things as well. We long to be close to the people who are like-minded, who share these things. And, you just wish, gosh, imagine if we all lived close enough to each other. And yet Daniel's across the country. I'm in the northwest part. He's in a place that will probably be wiped off the map. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe, but I think you're up north.
New York.
Well, whatever. But it's something that I think is beautiful for everyone, and many acknowledge that they look forward to. We have a weekday rosary, Monday through Friday, live at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everyone's welcome. We have people from all around the world who join us, primarily Europe and North America. And we have a lot of people who watch the replay in Australia because it's like 2 a.m. when we do it. But it's so beautiful to find more and more people joining us, how they found out about it. And we're doing what Our Lady said at Fatima: pray the rosary every day for peace and an end to the war. And the war is all around us. It's against our marriages. It's against our families. And when we know that and accept that, we can be a little bit more patient, knowing that this is where the devil's focusing, and increase our family prayer, get right with God sacramentally, and get right with your family as best you can, and allow God to lead from there, living in the divine will. Daniel has done such an amazing job doing the hard, heavy lifting for us to kind of bring it down to the essentials. And it's still quite a bit, but this is stuff, this is information and messages. I shouldn't say information. This is messages. These are messages that they will inspire you every step of the way. Like I said, I'm reading his book, like all jumping around by subject. And yes, there's a pedagogy, from cover to cover, but I'm so glad that I found the sections I wanted to go to, because, it's sort of like you want to read the last pages of a book to see if you want to read the rest. Well, this one you can pretty much pick up any section and you'll want to read the rest. So
there's so many people out there that just need to be quoted, and I'm just happy I got the chance to put them all in between the covers of one book.
I know, and in the era of peace, you can't be sued.
Exactly.
That's pretty nice. We're going to have...
I want to steal their words, yeah.
There's going to be an honor system.
Holy.
Okay, well, Dan, thank you so much. Once again, everybody, please check out what Daniel's doing on with DSD O'Connor blog.
.com. Just dsdoconnor.com.
Okay, dsdoconnor.com. And it's on the screen. I have it on the screen for you. Do that, subscribe, so that you also get his latest postings. I do, and I look forward to them. And I've been a little bit selfish in trying to use Daniel's time for this, because I never know if or when I'll have him again. So I'm hoping that these segments will speak to you, and you keep going back.
Yeah. Depends on how much longer both of us can survive with the persecution coming. So we'll
I know.
see.
Exactly. Well, any last words in 30 seconds?
Jesus, I trust in you. Thy will be done. I give you my will. Please give me yours in return. Say those words as often as you can. Strive to mean them every day, even more deeply, and you're on the right path.
Amen. Well, thank you, Daniel. God bless you, and God bless your family.
And God bless yours. God bless you all.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us in this series with Daniel O'Connor. Please go back and replay him, and more importantly, too, share him with your friends. So many are waiting for this message to reach them and give them a message of hope. message that they can have full confidence in, and it will change their lives. Don't ever be afraid of what someone may think because they're not familiar with something, or it may be just so out of their zone. This message comes with a lot of grace, so please be generous in what you do and what you share with your family and your friends. And you're really part of this remnant and this special, I like to call them special forces of evangelization, because it's so small, those who know this. But we have a responsibility to share it. Knowledge always comes with responsibility. So share it. Share this channel in general, and any way that you can support the Fulton Sheen Institute, you can always go to the Fulton Sheen or fultonsheen.institute, and you can look up the support area there. You could also find it in the show notes, ways to support us, to keep us on the air and moving forward, and being able to give as much time as we can to help draw you and your family closer to our Blessed Mother, our Lord, the Holy Spirit, and our Heavenly Father. So God bless you all, and I can't wait to join you again for another episode of The Catholic Patriot.
Right is right if nobody is right. Wrong is wrong if everybody is wrong. And believe me, in this error-infested world, what we really need is a church and an authority that is right not when the world is right, but one that is right when the world is wrong.
Thank you for joining us for our podcast. It's always an honor to be able to bring this powerful message that we have from so many of our guests at a critical time in history where Catholics are seeking answers. I now want to ask something of you. There is a very special event that I've created for parishes, and it's called War and Peace: Fulton Sheen, Fatima, and the Fate of the Family. This particular event is designed for the signs of our times, especially for Catholics who are saying, how do I wake up my community? You know, I know people who are faithful and they're prayerful, but they really seem to have no idea, or they're in a state of denial of what's really going on. And if they only knew, they would be making very different decisions in their own life for the protection and safety of their family, as well as just taking on that responsibility to evangelize like never before. And so this event, War and Peace, Fulton Sheen, Fatima, and the Fate of the Family, is, I think, the most important event that I've ever offered. It really helps Catholics to connect all the dots and what's going on in this critical moment of history, and more importantly, what we should be doing about it. What has heaven been asking us to do about it? What wisdom does Fulton Sheen bring to this picture, because he was a prophet for our times? So please go check this out. Go to fultonsheen.institute/war and peace, and you'll learn more about the event. And more importantly, schedule a time. Let's get on the phone or Zoom call together, and let's find a way to bring this to your parish. This may be the most important event you ever bring to your parish, especially in these times, and a great act of mercy for those who are seeking answers. And here's a way that you can bring it right in and not have to worry about doing it all yourself. And this is the great passion and mission of the Fulton Sheen Institute. So once again, go to fultonsheen.institute/war and peace. Go check it out, and please give me a call today. Please go to fultonsheen.institute and check out the latest offerings that we have for you. One of the things I really want to emphasize is that we have a weekday prayer group that meets at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, and we pray the Rosary every day. We have an international prayer family that meets faithfully every one of these days, and it's growing by the day. So please respond to what Our Lady asked of us at Fatima. Pray the Rosary every day for peace and an end to the war. Our families are depending on this, and it's been a great source of consolation and empowerment. And we've also had some pretty dramatic prayer responses for all those who are praying the Rosary. So check it out, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. And also, there's other ways that you can support the Fulton Sheen Institute simply by going to fultonsheen.institute and then going to the top, and you'll see support the FSI. And all of your contributions that are made there are tax deductible if you live in the United States. So just another reason to be generous and help us to expand our offerings for the many needs that we have today. So thank you, and God bless you. Never in history has the prayer of the Rosary been more needed to save our families, our countries, and defeat the evils of the world than now. The Fulton Sheen Institute worked closely with the Roman Rosary to develop the most unique, beautiful, and meaningful rosary that was inspired by Fulton Sheen's World Mission Rosary. This special handcrafted rosary continues Sheen's passion to support the mission of the Church to evangelize the entire world. Each decade of the rosary has a different color, which corresponds with a different continent. Yellow for Asia, red for the Americas, white for Europe, blue for the nations of Oceania, and green for Africa. Each Fulton Sheen Aroma Rosary comes with a set of 4 pure essential oil blends that have been chosen for their therapeutic and theological significance. These blends correspond to the 4 mysteries of the Rosary. Simply choose the oil for the mystery of the day, drop a small drop in the palm of your hand, and massage the oil over the surface, being sure to catch the lava beads. You're good to go, and your prayer will linger longer with these beautiful aromatic notes. Every Fulton Sheen Aroma Rosary you purchase supports our mission to fight the battle for the hearts and souls of the Christian family and lead our world back to God. So visit the Fulton Sheen Institute's store and pick up your beautiful Fulton Sheen Aroma Rosary today. Get one for you, your family members, and your close friends, and don't forget your pastor. Thank you so much for your prayers and your support.